Okay, then I'd like to introduce to you, if you didn't get to meet him yesterday, Dr. Joe Carella. He's going to be leading us through leading under pressure. We've actually got some people that returned today that experienced such great stuff yesterday, they asked to come back today. So I'm sure if you were with us yesterday, you sat across the dinner table and either practiced your listening skills or were a little critical about others' listening skills. So we'll see what we can find out about all this leading under pressure. Joe, take it away.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Wendy. And folks, I am really pleased to be with you here this morning. And leading under pressure is something that I guess I would say I pay attention to and I'm very passionate about also. And part of that comes from the work that I do. And if you've seen in my bio, in addition to being a senior instructor, a faculty member, and coach for the Leadership Development Institute at Eckerd, I'm also a clinical sports psychologist. So I work with athletes, specifically professional athletes at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Orlando Magic. And so I became interested in the concept of how leaders lead under pressure and started seeing so many parallels between an athlete performing under pressure in their sport, as well as being so synonymous with the kinds of pressures that people experience in leadership in the work environment. And so that's why I think that it'll be fun for us to dig into this. And we'll start by looking, obviously, at what are some of our overall goals. And first, I want us to make sure we understand what pressure is. And not just kind of how to define it, which we will, but also what are the sources of it. And they change for people too. The same pressures are not the same for each individual. We're going to learn how our attention shifts, especially during times of stress and pressure. And when I say stress throughout this, I also mean pressure. They are different, but under stress, we typically experience a lot of pressure, and that impacts the way in which we perform. Also want to improve your self-awareness about both your attentional and interpersonal styles. So I heard Wendy checking in with you to make sure you had a chance to review your TAIS. That's the assessment you took. It is the Attentional and Interpersonal Style Inventory. And we wanted to get that in your hands in advance because, as you could tell, there are a lot of details in there. There's a lot of information. And so we'll be doing things today to make sure that you understand that, give you a chance to talk with others about it, as well as introduce you to some new components of it as well. And we're going to look at how important competition is to you. The assessment, the TAIS, measures kind of how competitive we can be in both the ways in which we carry ourselves physically and kind of how important it is for us to be right. So I like that part of it. And in fact, you're going to be engaging in an activity to see how important it is to you to win. And then we're going to engage in breakouts conversations. We want you to deepen your understanding of the TAIS and also give you a chance to talk with others. So that's what we got planned for today. I hope that's what you're looking forward to. So when we talk about pressure, and I did see a chat message just come in. Let me see if that's something for me. Oh, Jim saying, sorry, I have to deal with Tom Brady now. Well, at least he's on this side. It's might be a little bit easier for us. And that's one of my frustrations with COVID-19. I haven't had a chance to meet him in person yet because the facilities still aren't open. All right, so pressure, what is it? Definition, according to Oxford, is the continuous physical force exerted on or against an object by something in contact with it. But we're really not talking about physical forces here, are we? We're talking about internal forces and how we perceive pressure. Also, it can be defined as the use of persuasion, influence, or intimidation to make someone do something. And ironically, I think the second part of this definition is really related to what we internally experience. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have superiors in organizations that say, we must get this done, it must be done in this time frame, and put pressure on us to accomplish tasks. But I think also there's a strong internal component to this as well. So I thought these definitions captured it effectively. And so I'm kind of curious to hear from you guys, and this is where we'll use the chat function. What are the pressures you experience at work? Let's hear some of those. got to tell you, I do experience a little bit of pressure thinking about, now Tom Brady's in our organization. I got to make sure I'm on my game too. So random deadlines, timelines, pressure to perform multiple roles and functions. Absolutely. Get things done quickly. Time crunches on reports, short suspenses, having to juggle a variety of things, not having the resources to be able to accomplish all of the tasks, conflicting priorities, understanding the intent, inconsistency, difficult employees, absolutely. Timelines. It looks like timelines, pressure to meet deadlines, those seem to be almost the number one that's coming up. Teleworking, that's true. Not being able to have the contact with folks also. Putting people in hazardous conditions because of the job that needs to be done. Unclear guidance, interpersonal conflicts. So there are so many different ones. I'm glad that you captured those. And not having the right talent to complete things, those resources. Talent and people are absolutely pressures. So we might experience it kind of like this image suggests, right? We might experience it as someone beating down on top of us, or pressure that's literally exerting force on top of us. And so when we think about this, I'm going to talk about the other kinds of pressures that you experience. I didn't hear the word fear, at least in the ones that I was able to read, but I think fear is the internal pressure that we experience. Fear of failing. And for some people, even fear of succeeding. Well, if I get this done, am I going to be expected to be able to meet deadlines that are unrealistic in the future? And I hear some heads nodding. Fear of failure, though, what happens? Am I supporting the mission if I'm not able to get these kinds of things done? So we experience that internally. And then I think expectations are another great source of pressure to people. I guarantee that you have your own internal expectations for what the performance will look like. I'm actually looking at some of the bandwidth issues, yep, and VPN issues, okay. So workload, right? So are we able to perform to our level of expectations? Are we actually performing to other people's levels of expectation? And are the people that report to me, are they performing at my level of expectation? So many challenges in that. So we put pressure on ourselves to perform. Others put pressure on us. We can put pressure on them as well to perform effectively. And one of the things I hear oftentimes, both in professional athletes, and I say that to you because this is not sometimes I think we look at the folks that are on the fields of play as being completely getting their acts together, and we're the only ones that don't. The reality is professional athletes, leaders in organization, all deal with some self-doubt and some stress that comes along with that as well. So I'm going to give you a chance right now just to chat in, if you will, what your thoughts are about these kinds of pressures that are there, and which are the ones. Is it about fear? Is it about performance? Is it about pressure and expectations that come from others? What else would you say if you categorize these in this way or other ways that are meaningful to you? We'll look for any responses you might have. All right, nothing to chat in about. No worries. So let's go a little further then. We're going to talk about this concept, and here's where we have a poll question for you. And actually, let's see the chat that just popped in. All right, fear of the unknown. The biggest impact for Roger is from internal struggles with perfection. And that's great, Roger. I'm glad that you said that, because those are kind of self-expectations and things have to be 100% right all the time. And while sometimes that works for us, sometimes it doesn't. And that's actually a great segue into my question for you about what you know about the Yerkes-Dotson law, okay? And I did see another chat come in, so before I move on, I want to read that.
That's a good one.
And it is from Megan, saying expectations from senior leaders, that they don't truly understand what they want or need, that lack of direction, right? And that's exactly what Jacqueline is talking about, how making the wrong decision can feel like a lot of pressure too, especially if you're not getting direction. And am I good enough often resonates with Cassandra. So more than less, you're on the go, 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 right? Trying to measure up and hit the moving goalpost. These are real things that we as individuals have to struggle with. And it's not even just during times of COVID-19. This is on the daily that we deal with that. So in the effort to kind of help us to see what we can do to manage this pressure a little bit more, I'm going to introduce you to this concept, and maybe you know it. So I'm going to ask you, how well do you know the Yerkes-Dodson law? So when the poll comes up, you'll give a 5 if you know everything about the Yerkes-Dodson law and you can explain it well. 4 if you know the Yerkes-Dodson well enough to understand it, but maybe not explain it to others. 3 if you've heard of the Yerkes-Dodson law. 2 if you have no idea what I'm talking about. And 1, please don't tell me I've broken the law. So if you would, Wendy, please put the poll up there so we can see the level of knowledge with this. I'll give you another, how many people have responded?
I've got 19, 20, we're almost there. Got 9 to go.
Let's get a few more. Some of the ones that are being typed in here are 1, between 2 and 3. We got a 2. 4.
I think that's going to be it.
Yeah, so let's go with those. So the results are? All right, not sure what it is. That's the majority of you. Now, I gave myself a 5, so I might be the only one there. I don't really know that I know everything about it, but I think I know it well enough to explain it. So, with the Yerkes-Dodson law, it's a little bit of a complicated image here, but it's an important thing for us to understand. When we lead under pressure, what are we trying to do? We're trying to perform at our best. So the axis on the left, the performance, low, if you will, on that is weak performance, and strongest performance is on the high side of the axis. That, I believe, is the x-axis, if I'm remembering anything. The y-axis, is that right? The up and down is the x, and the y is the parallel, left to right? I hope so. Clearly, that was not my strength. Arousal is really how much energy or how much stress we experience, okay? So what the Yerkes-Dodson law tells us, if we want to optimize our performance, then we have to find that balance. High performance comes from moderate or mid-range arousal. So think about players that you've seen in sports that you've enjoyed watching, where they look like they're calm under pressure. They may look on the external like they have very low arousal, like they're walking around really calm, nothing is impacting them. There's an image that I remember and saw it recently in the Michael Jordan special that was put out there, The Last Dance, where when Larry Bird, and those of you who are old school basketball fans might remember this, Larry Bird was actually a coach for a period of time. And he had a team where they hit a last second shot. And if you looked at the expression on Larry Bird's face when that occurred, he was completely expressionless. You would think he was asleep. There was practically no level of arousal. Now, while that might have been the look on the outside, internally, I guarantee you, he was in this mid-range, okay? High arousal is like you're freaking out. Low, you're practically asleep. So we want to find that mid-range, because when we feel a little bit of that energy to be at our best is usually when we're going to perform to our best. So I'd like you right now to try and use those, the annotation function. Let's start with arrows if we can. And when you think about yourself under pressure, where on this bell curve would you say you typically perform or you experience when you're under pressure? Because high levels of arousal can negatively impact performance, but low levels of arousal can also impact that. So let's see if we can practice with some of those annotations in here. Ideally, the arrow. I'll give you a minute to find those arrows.
If you have them, they'll be in the drop-down menu from the top in the view options menu.
Yeah. So we're seeing them. See, this is what I meant, Wendy. For some reason, they're not staying in place. They're kind of popping around. Yeah. But what I'm seeing from most folks is you're somewhere between that mid-level performance or upper third level of performance. All right, now we're going with stars. That's a good idea. Or other stamps.
Yeah, the stamps will stick.
Yeah, the stamps will stick. So let's go ahead. Everybody select a stamp, a star or a check or an X, those types of things. And put when you're really feeling pressure where you feel like you're at. Excellent. Yeah, some of the folks are on that higher side. And it's important for us to be thinking about this because it gives us an understanding of what we need to do to adjust, to be performing at our absolute best. And the TAIS will also tell you that. So thank you for removing those. Because pressure, and I love this Tommy Lasorda quote, and I hope you guys don't mind that I'm going to be making these sports references. Tommy Lasorda was a manager and a baseball player himself. He said, pressure is a word that is misused in our vocabulary. When you start thinking of pressure, it's because you've started to think of failure. And I kind of like that quote because it is something that we can tend to do. And that's one of the thoughts that actually gets us on the higher side of the arousal. Wendy and Deborah, I'm going to trust you guys. If you see something in the chat that I should refer back to, please let me know.
You got it.
Thank you. And so when we start worrying about stuff, and so those types of things, that's when we can impact our performance unnecessarily on the negative side. Okay. So we really want to think about, where is my midpoint? Where are my midpoints of arousal where I can be alert without feeling and worrying about the failure or the stress that comes next? Got to be awake enough to do that. And along these lines, there's this Harvard Business Review survey that was done that I think you'll find interesting because it does speak to where we are on the performance continuum, if you will, or on the bell curve there. So in this survey, the Harvard Business Review authors surveyed over 1,300 employees to describe, they were asked to describe, what is your leader's style like under stress or pressure? And what is the impact of their behavior on their work? So I'm going to present the options here. I'm going to ask you again to use your stamps to select the answer that the survey would say. So think about, what is that TV show? Family Feud. Survey says, so if you believe, and I'll present all 6, I would encourage you to wait until I present all 6 to put your stamps up there. One of the responses was, leaders are more upset and emotional than calm and in control. Leaders are more devious and deceitful than candid and honest. Leaders are more closed-minded and controlling than open and curious. Leaders are more angry and heated than cool and collected. Leaders avoid or sidestep rather than be direct and unambiguous. And finally, leaders ignore or reject rather than listen or seek understanding. So go ahead and put your stamp, whatever the shape is that you've chosen, not the arrow, but the stamps, on the item that you would say, survey says the #1 answer was. All right, we're getting a bunch in here. Good. I got an answer in the chat from number 5. All right, it looks like we have the most. I'm going to say it looks like 6, well, 6, 5, and 3 are certainly the ones with the most. And if I'm adding correctly, I see 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 votes for number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 votes for number 5. Right? Is that? So number 1 gets 1 vote, 2 has 0 votes, 3 has 10 votes, 4 has 1 vote, 5 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 votes also.
Number 6, it looks like, has 6, Joe.
6 votes. All right. So leader in the clubhouse. We'll see what the survey says. Number 3 would be number 1. Number 5 would be number 2, and number 6 would be number 3. So if you wouldn't mind clearing those then, Wendy. Survey says you're correct. Number 3. 53% of the people surveyed said of all leaders, are more closed-minded and controlling rather than open and curious during times of stress. So what does that tell us? If our stress levels are high and we are in that high place of energy, arousal, that's going to be a problem for those we lead. Number 1 actually did get 1 vote. That was tied for second, with 45% of the people say that the leaders are upset and emotional than calm and in control. And number 6, which got 6 votes, that leaders ignore or reject rather than listen and seek to understand. And I think number 5 was the next one, but it was actually number 4, angry and heated. Number 5 was actually the 5th, and that is 37% of the people said they avoid or sidestep rather than be direct and unambiguous. And number 2 are more devious and deceitful than candid and honest, we got 30%. Now, the fact that number 5 got as many votes as you guys gave it, it kind of suggests to me that's probably what you're experiencing in your environment from those that lead you, that they may be sidestepping rather than being direct and unambiguous.
And Joe, we do have a chat from Cassandra saying it tells us that our leaders have fears as well.
Ooh, excellent comment. I love that, Cassandra. Because they're experiencing pressure too. One of the things sometimes that I find is that what we do is people don't always appreciate the pressure others are under when we ourselves are under pressure. And so we have less empathy and we have less appreciation for what others are going through. So Cassandra, being able to comment on that was great, and recognizing that in other people and what we can provide. So that's wonderful. And I do encourage you to reflect on this a little bit. I know myself, when I'm really feeling pressure, I get shorter. I absolutely become less patient than I would like to be. And so I can become more upset or emotional than calm and in control. I need to remind myself about the importance of staying calm and under control, and to be curious as opposed to direct toward action. So I would even right now, and please don't annotate this at all, but kind of just select one of these for yourself also. Which of these might you be most vulnerable to appearing like to others? So I'll give you a second to select that, just for yourself. You tend to be more closed-minded, more emotional, rejecting of other ideas, angry, avoidant, or I do kind of like the phrase devious and deceitful. I wouldn't want that to be associated with me, but I think it's kind of fun. All right, so with that level of awareness, we're going to continue. So our target is really to get to this, what this image is capturing. How do we remain calm and at peace while all of these demands are upon us? And I really do believe that building upon our own resilience, and if any of you attended some of the workshops we offered on resilience, I think it's a useful thing to do. Being able to be mindful, being able to stay in the present, being able to really breathe through some of the stressors before we react, I think is absolutely essential. So as you can see, so much of leading under pressure is also about regulating your own emotional reactions to things. And that's the interpersonal world of the TAIS. All right. So let's get into this assessment. And I'm kind of curious just to hear those of you that have had a chance to review yours. Please, let's have a couple of you unmute and share. What were your impressions, just first and foremost, of the assessment itself? Anybody?
It seemed to ask some of the same questions in a different manner over and over again.
You know why it felt that way? Because that's exactly what it was done. And tests like this or assessments like this, inventories, are designed to really make kind of wear you down from trying to present yourself one way and really get the true color of where you are. So you're right, the same question is asked repeatedly to try and make sure it accurately assesses what it's saying it's going to assess. So it's annoying, but in fact, it's one of the most effective things about this inventory. Anybody else?
Well,
Yeah,
I felt,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I felt that some of the questions, I almost wanted to ask about what the situation was, because it put me into either a frequently or that type of thing. And I felt, well, answering the question thinking, well, it's not frequently. Well, sometimes surely I do this, but not frequently. And so then it maybe made me respond not so much on the highs, and I was kind of in the middle on a couple answers because I didn't want to say, well, it's not frequently. So I was overthinking maybe a little bit, but felt like that.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's trying to get at how we perceive it, because kind of what I'm hearing you say is the frequency might not have been as high dependent on the situation, but the assessment's really trying to get at, well, how do you most often respond? And so the fact that you kind of gave more of those mid-range answers suggests it's going to depend on the circumstance.
For sure, yeah.
And that's okay. So you'll probably find, though, the results that you'll end up more in the mid-range also of each of the continua.
Yeah, that was my exact same question. I was concerned about, okay, wait a minute. I put myself in different scenarios and I would have answered the question maybe just a little bit differently. But so I decided just to focus at work, because sometimes it would also make me kind of wander off into, my personal life as well. So just focusing at work kind of gave it some better direction for me. And I will tell you, I was quite surprised with the output of it. So thank you.
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad.
And so for me, I was also somewhat surprised, Joe.
Yeah.
With some of the results anyway. Now, some of the questions that I had to answer, I had to read the question multiple times to ensure that I understood it. And answered it correctly. And there was still some of them that I'm really unsure whether I answered correctly or not.
Yeah.
But for example, the decision-making style, I scored a 75%, which is on the high side, and it's outside of the executive leadership range. So I'm going, what the hey? So I scroll down and I read the description, and after I read it multiple times, I'm going, okay, well, that kind of makes sense now. So it was very informative, and I certainly enjoyed it. It was interesting to read the results.
Good, good. And Jim, you just described a lot of why I asked this question from the very beginning, because this assessment, like many others, has more items, unlike others, has more items, and it can kind of push us, I think, to say, well, where and when is this the case? And so having something specifically in mind, like at work, is useful. But still, the frequency of questions also helps us to kind of get at my true self, not just if I'm trying to present myself in any one specific way.
Yeah,
also,
so like one of the extroversion and the introversion. So extroversion, I'm like 88%. introversion, I'm 22%.
Mhm.
So when I gave that percentage to my wife, she just like, well, duh. So it was, yeah, it was interesting. I enjoyed it very much.
Spot on. Good, good. Yeah, many spouses will oftentimes say, "You really had to go to this workshop to learn this about you? I could have told you if you just asked me."
You know what? You took the words out of my mouth. And I've got the door shut so she can't hear me.
That's good. And the other thing that you did, Jim, and I trust that all of you have done this. This assessment, even the way it's presented, is not as intuitive or as friendly as some of the other assessments that you might have experienced with us at LDI. And that's because it really wasn't created just for commercial use, to be quite honest. And that's why it has as many different components to it. It's as long as it is. But I like it so much because I think it gives great, great information. It does require us as readers, though, to dig into it and really see what it's about. Okay. So good, good. Now let's talk about performance success. And so performance success really does come down to a variety of things. And I'm going to share with you my favorite phrase of all of sports psychology in a moment. It's related to these. Success in any performance demands that we pay attention to task relevant cues, right? And the other thing is, you must be able to shift your focus of concentration, we're going to define concentration in a moment, along two different intersecting dimensions of attention. We'll talk about that in a sec. But my favorite phrase in all of sports psychology that I learned is related to this. And it is a mouthful, but it's a really simple concept. And it is, performance success, or to be at your best, to perform at your best, requires you to attend to performance relevant cues of your attentional field. Now, I told you it was a mouthful. Attending to performance relevant cues in your attentional field. And so that's a mouthful of basically saying, if I want to perform well, I got to pay attention to the things that are going on right now and whatever it is that I'm taking care of. So you really have to be present focused. And it has to lead me to perform well to do it. And my attention has to be able to shift. So if I'm playing golf, relevant things for me are the design of the hole, the kind of skills I have at making the ball move from one place to another, the wind conditions, the temperature, all of these factors, those are the things that are relevant to me being able to hit a good golf shot. What's going on with my children at home? How my business is going? What's going on for my opponent? All of those things are completely irrelevant. Completely irrelevant. What's relevant is the stuff that I have control over. And while it may not sound revolutionary for me to say it like this, I'm surprised how often we create performance stress for ourselves, pressures placed upon ourselves because we're paying attention to the wrong stuff. We're not paying attention to things that we can control or things that are actually in front of us that we can manage. Anytime we start thinking about, well, what's my boss's reaction going to be to this report that I write? Or what's going to happen in the future if this does or does not occur? Those things are actually irrelevant to how you execute your tasks at any point in time. So I'm going to ask you guys, all right, a chat just came in, maybe it's about this. I'm going to ask you to give me some examples of things that you do control and what is irrelevant. So Roger says, sometimes we're forced to pay attention to the irrelevant. Roger, if you don't mind, would you unmute yourself and tell us what you mean by that?
For me, it seems that sometimes what's easy to measure becomes what we're told to measure because that's what people understand, and it may not be the best measurement of outcome. And so sometimes you're asked to focus on things, to be able to put together, let's say, a stoplight chart or, red, amber, green kind of process, and they're focusing on the wrong things. And then it becomes about the process and not the outcome anymore. So sometimes the irrelevant things take on disproportionate importance
to other people because they want you to start putting these measures on it, or you tell us where we're at, red, amber, yellow, green, and that takes you away from actually completing the task. Is that what you're also referring to?
Right, and so it becomes more about the measurement or the report rather than the actual focus being on the output of, or whatever your purpose was.
I gotcha. And in fact, I think sometimes people will refer to what you're describing there as almost the office politics part of it. Why can't you just let me do my job and stop making me take time to make you feel better about something, or managing up, those types of things? What I would suggest, and this is a way to be less resentful of that, is to be able to accept that, in fact, that is relevant to your performance. Because if you have a boss or other people that are in the organization that are knocking on the door constantly and preventing you from doing your work, then that becomes even more damaging. So if you will, taking the time, separating yourself out and offering that information might be able to reduce some of the other stressors.
Definitely, it's a necessary evil at times.
Yes, yeah, and that's why I think people talk about it as like politics. Megan says, inclusion of other departments members in order to be viewed as being collaborative. Right, and those are great things to, I encourage folks to be able to work with their teams, to be able to recognize what are the things that only I can do, and where are the decisions that need to be able to make in collaboration with others. And I find that organizations and people don't often have those discussions about where shared decision-making is essential and where it's not. And that can absolutely be a source of pressure too. Metrics sometimes drive incorrect outcomes, okay? And then it's not just office politics, it's answering to the big army, right? And that's why it's relevant. It's relevant because those other forces can impact what you do on a regular basis. And so you're right, if it's important to higher ups, then we have to be able to pay attention to that. So good. So let's keep going with this, and let's get to specifically where our attention goes. Because again, if only we can control ourselves, let's be as focused upon that as we can. So concentration, which is what we're going to be looking at in our ability to attend, is action or power focusing one's own attentional or mental effort. Where am I pointing my arrow, if you will? And concentration can be gathering of other people and things, but in this case, we're going to go with definition number 1. And so you'll see, this is what I'm going to present to you now is the background for for how the foundation of the TAIS is made. So the notion here, and this was originally, this assessment was created for athletes to look at athletic performance. And then what was learned is how important it is in business performance as well. So there are 4 quadrants or 4 styles of concentration that are separated by these two dimensions. All right, so the first one we're looking at is the bandwidth, and that's broad to narrow. And it's where do we pay attention? What are the variety of cues that we focus on? And so think of it like this. If you're a photographer, or even if you just have a mobile device, a smartphone, you have in your camera a more narrow focus or a broad. So you have telefocus or wide lens. And I'd like you to literally think about these concentration styles about your eyes, right? So are you paying attention? Are you stepping back and looking at the big picture? That would be broad. Or am I narrowing it down to the telefocus, okay? And obviously there's a continuum. It can be really, really broad, or it can be narrowed down. Think of it even in terms of when you're driving. When you're driving, I remember being taught early on, you don't want to be just staring at the brake lights of the car in front of you. You want to be scanning the entire environment. And then when your attention needs to be shifted down to a more focused area, you do so. So that's broad and narrow. The next one, external, internal, is about the direction of our attention, okay? And is it being directed externally? So when I'm driving, I'm looking at the entire road. That's external. And when I'm sitting in my office and I'm thinking about how do I want to present about leading under pressure, I can even kind of close my eyes like I am right now and think about what would be most engaging, what would be most informative for folks. So where is my attention? Very much internal, on my thoughts, on my knowledge base, etc. You can even think of it as while you're reading, your focus is external because I'm reading this book, but then it triggers something inside of me and it makes me think, and then I go inside. So I hope that's clear. And if there are any questions, pipe in. Because performance success requires us to be tuned into one channel at a time. We can only actually be in one channel at a time. And by channel, I mean one of these 4 quadrants. I'll go into more detail in a moment. So we can only have our attention be in one of those areas at a time. And that's one of the things that people sometimes don't believe. Because any of you who believe that you're great multitaskers, really what it means is that your attention is shifting back and forth between a variety of things, and I would contend you're not as effective as you could be if you dedicated specific time and attention to one factor. And in fact, there's some really interesting literature out there about how some of the most effective leaders in this world currently are single taskers alone. And yes, multitasking is not. So what we want to do is we have to recognize we must be able to attune into the different frequency and channels as needed by the context, And then finally, our ability to tune into the proper channel at the right time is what really leads to the highest performance success, okay? So one thing at a time, one place at a time, one channel at a time, because otherwise we are becoming distracted and confused. So single tasking. And Cassandra says, however, when you're on one thing, you're ignoring 50 others that come back to haunt you when focusing on one thing. I would contend though, Cassandra, that being focused on that one gets that thing done well, and then you move on to the next to be able to have fewer errors involved. And that's one of the reasons, if you think about this, is why I come back to driving. Texting and driving is a problem. Having some conversations and turning our head and not looking at the road, that's a problem. And while we may not be in physical danger in our offices when we're trying to multitask, we are in energy. We risk losing a lot of energy, and we also risk not being able to complete each task as effectively as others. So here are the channels. I like you to think about these. Channel 1, which is broad and external, is really where we're assessing what's going on in a situation. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to ask you to predict which channel you think is your favorite or your best, the one you spend the most time in. Because even though we have to occupy all 4 of these channels at any point in time, some of us we all tend to have one thing, especially under pressure. So if you're in the assessment channel, you're staying focused on what's going on out there, and it's broad. You're looking at all the factors that are coming in. So you're reading people and situations. Folks that tend to analyze, they're broad, but now they've turned it internal. So they've sought the data, and now they're trying to figure out how it fits into the big picture and come up with some of those complex problems that have to be solved. Next, and I'd actually encourage you to think of this as a sequence as the most effective way to go. Focusing on thinking about tactical solutions. So you're preparing. So we assess, analyze, and prepare before we act. Ideally, this is what we do, where we focus attention on the task for completion. So I'm going to go back to golf for a minute because it's the game that I played most at the highest level. And so in a golf shot, when you approach a ball, you have to assess the situation. I have to understand, like I said, what's the target? How long is the hole? What options do I have? What kinds of shots I can hit? What's the weather? What's the temperature? Those types of things. So once I've figured out all of those factors, then I go internal and I stay broad where I'm analyzing. Well, I can hit, for those golfers that are in the crowd, I can hit a draw, or I can hit a fade, I can hit it high, or I can hit it low. I have to analyze which of those shots is most effective for the demands of the situation. Then I prepare. And what does that mean? I take a practice swing, I imagine myself hitting the shot well, and then I act. I step in next to the ball, pull the trigger, and I swing. And in golf, it's very neat and easy to see this. In our work, it's not always as neat and easy, and that's why I think many of us fall into the mode of being multitaskers, feeling more pressure because more demands get placed upon us. So I'm going to ask somebody here, if there's somebody that feels comfortable enough to talk about the work that you do and see if you can kind of talk us through how these 4 channels are necessary at any point in time. And Roger, I don't know if that was a volunteer or is the OODA loop you just mentioned. But anybody that's willing to kind of talk us through how this might be true for your work? And I promise I'll help you out with it. Anybody?
I'll give it a shot.
Please.
For me, in the training world, the assessing awareness for reading people in situations, we often get asked to provide training, and when we do it, we try to interact with folks to say, okay, well, what is the purpose of the training that you want? What are you trying to accomplish? And talk to them. And sometimes they may come to us saying, I need this, or I want this, but then we're trying to figure out what it is that they need. And so then by talking to them, then that leads naturally into analyzing what is the big picture, what's going on here, and to give them the best possible options or solutions. May not even be training, but to try and meet the goal that they're trying to achieve. So we have to analyze what it is that we came up with from that first assessment, and then start to prepare what it is those possible options are that we'll provide them. Is it training? And if so, what type of training? And then after preparing for it, then with them leading them into making a decision that's best for the customer, and we execute on whatever that final plan was.
Roger, that was perfect. That was absolutely laid out exactly what I'm thinking. And in fact, when you say we have to find out if that's even what they want, because they said they came to you for training, but you didn't just prescribe a training program. You did the full assessment, and then the analyze stage, channel 2, is where you actually say, well, they say they want this, but what they really need is this. And then prepare based upon that, and then act to execute. Outstanding. That's exactly what I was looking for. So I want you right now, again, to think, where might you get stuck is the way that I think about this. People that get stuck in channel 1, they continually want to assess and assess more, and I almost can't get enough information. Analyzing, those are the folks that are overly analytical. It's like, well, wait, but what about this, and what about this, and what about this, and what about this? The preparation folks, where you can get stuck in there, it's like, well, but we need this before we can go. It needs to be perfect. Folks with perfectionism as a challenge can oftentimes have a problem in channel 3, and that's the internal narrow. And then the act, which is the external narrow, which is this is the one solution. People that, in a sense, favor channel 4 don't do enough assessment in channel 1, and they just jump to the action. Oh, you want training? Here's training. So those are some of the ways to begin to think about this. And Roger, you're saying you love the analyze part. Excellent. So a couple more.
Joe,
Yes.
so this This reminds me, or I'm kind of comparing this to, I'm a Six Sigma green belt.
Okay.
So this reminds me of the DMAIC approach. So you define, you measure, you analyze, you improve, and you control.
Okay.
So as you went through each one of these quadrants, I somewhat compared it to what I've been accustomed to utilizing throughout the course of my career. And, you know, for me, control is an equivalent to channel 4 act.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And that's kind of where I find myself is, okay, let's just act on it. Let's get it done. Let's complete it. Let's make sure that it's controlled and that it's maintained. So yeah, I'll go ahead and admit that I find myself in channel 4 quite frequently. And I know that the others are just as important,
Mm-hmm.
but for me and my personality, yeah, mine's in channel 4.
And I'll say you're not alone in that, Jim, especially in an organization where there are a number of demands. And anytime, if you ever say, well, we just don't have enough time to do all of that, that means the situation, the organization, the volume that comes through pushes toward channel 4. And that's where many mistakes and errors can be made. And that's why, again, I love the TAIS because it helps us understand where am I more likely to make some of those mistakes. So good, this is great, great discussion. And so going just a little bit further, different people pay attention to different things in different ways, obviously. And so if you prefer channel 4, Jim, then that might mean that you're not paying as much attention to the broad internal, the broad external as much because you're jumping straight to that channel 4. And we don't all have the same level of concentration or focus of it. So accepting that about ourselves is okay. Being aware of what those components are is what becomes most essential. A couple more quick details about this, and then I'm going to have you engage in an activity. In channel 1, you pay attention to a wide variety of cues, and folks with preference for channel 1 are good at reading people typically in situations. Channel 2, outstanding, typically at putting their attention on the facts and ideas and analyzing them. And usually good at the big picture, complex problem solving, almost like give me the more complex the problem, the more my arousal level jumps up. Channel 3, tend to concentrate on recall thoughts and pieces of information that are necessary to get the task done, and usually good at recalling that information. And channel 4, oops, wrong way, is you tend to act, right? And you do one thing at a time until it's done, which again, that's that single tasking that I really prefer. So again, I offer this data to you to consider what are the ways in which, or what is the channel that I might spend the most time in, and which channel do I need to make sure I do a better job of operating in as well. So if channel 2, the analyze is where I might get stuck, I need to really balance it out with channel 4. And here's the thing that I would encourage in teams, knowing this about yourself, finding the folks that are different from you, and helping each other to be able to move along the sequence, if you will. So under stressful situations, it's important to select the appropriate concentration style, right? But what we can tend to do is we get stuck in one, and rather than moving and shifting, we tend to just stay there and longer, faster, harder, and louder. And so our greatest strength becomes our greatest liability, okay? And that's again why this insight is so necessary. Now, we're gonna engage in a quick little competition here, all right? And I love this cartoon. First time I saw it, it made me think of this. So the boss says to the direct report, yeah, you can have your raise, Tom, as long as you're fast enough. And so can you focus your attention enough to pull that out of the mousetrap? And do you remember as kids, the game concentration? I know I like it. I like playing it with the kids, with my kids. It's a lot of fun. In fact, that's what we're going to ask you to do now. So in the chat box, you're going to see that I am placing a link, okay? And that link is going to lead you to this game of concentration. And what I'd like you to do, and the way that it works is each of these gray boxes is going to show an image. And when the image pops up, you look for the match and you keep moving them back and forth until you complete the entire deck. Now, I'd like each of you to go play that, open the link in the chat box to go play it. Now, the clock starts as soon as you open the link, and you will have to slide down just a little bit to be able to get there. And I want you to keep track of the fastest time that you get. We'll give you enough time to play a couple of rounds. And Cassandra, yes, it is most important to utilize all channels at the appropriate times. You have to shift between them when the demands are necessary. So if you're acting, if you're in channel 4, but really relevant new information came in, you got to jump to channel 1 and start assessing it, then figure out how to analyze the data, prepare the new approach, and then move forward. Oh, my problem is I think I put it into the, so I didn't put the, here we go. It's going to be to everybody now. All right, here we go. Everyone should now have the link in the chat box. All you need to do is select it, as I just did, and you can probably see that I have to move up, and the game will be here now, and I would start to play. So go ahead and play, folks. Find the matches. We'll give you 5 minutes to do so. And when you come back, we'd like you to let us know what your best time was. Was it 1 minute or somewhere between 1 and 10 minutes?
As you get your best time, feel free to take your stamp and annotate the slide that Joe has put up. I notice people are putting it in the chat box, but if you're able to stamp as if we were building a bar graph, that would be wonderful. So stamp above the time on the timeline.
Yeah, and we're getting some times. Wendy, can you put these some stamps at, we've got Stan at 2:08, Megan at 3:04, John at 2:34, Charles at 3:41, Cassandra 2:47, Bobby 2:40, Heidel Marie at 3:15. Wow, we've got Jen at 1:46, Angela at 3:41, Lakita at 2:13. Kim saying way too slow. Alicia's at 2:16. Tim is at 3:17. We got Jacqueline at 3. Jim's a way too slow. Whoa, we got Nicole at 1:58. Mary 2:53. Jacqueline at 3. Excellent. Excellent. So you can see we're kind of clustered there between the 140, what was it? 140, what was that best time?
It looks like our best time was 146.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah,
We had
146.
a 158 as well.
Yeah, Jen got 146.
Yep, and Kathy's at,
And Nicole was right behind her at 158.
yeah. So Jen, I don't know if you play concentration a lot, but that is phenomenal. So now I'm going to go back to this for a sec. So actually, if we can clear those off. I want you to write now, how much effort did you put into getting your best time? 1, not at all. 10, significant. So 5, that's kind of that mid-range, that sum. Just have you put some numbers up there. And we got a 10.
Joe, I have a poll for this. Do you want the poll?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, do the poll, do the poll.
Okay.
So those of you that put it in the chat, if you wouldn't mind answering the poll. Give it 5 more
And
seconds.
yep, I think we're there.
Let's see what the results are looking like. Yeah, it looks about halfway. Although, you know what? I got a feeling that Jen, if you would unmute yourself, if you said, are you the one that said 10 where it was significant, or 8?
Absolutely said 10, yes.
Yep.
You're right. I grew up doing puzzles and games, and that was like my wheelhouse. So I thrive.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, you haven't lost your touch.
Not at all. Not at all. And you can see how the concentration is necessary there, right? You didn't really have to assess much of what was going on here, right? We basically put that out for you. But you did kind of have to assess what's on the board. And then you had to go to channel 2 to think about, all right, well, where are these things going to be? What's my strategy going to be? Then prepare by pulling out the, or flipping the cards at the right time and obviously doing it. So you really are jumping between all 4 of those. And I ask about how significant the importance of it was to you is because that is a measure of competitiveness. And so when I think about this, I want to ask you this also, because this is a measure of competitiveness. What was your initial reaction to hearing those times of others, especially Jen's 146, which is phenomenal? I'm personally feeling a little ashamed of myself right now that I have not broken the 2-minute mark. And now I feel like I have a new bar that I have to meet. So I ask you just to reflect upon that, because as you hear other people's times, that speaks a little bit to, well, where's my drive coming from? Am I putting some pressure on myself for that too? So we are, unfortunately, and it's partially because we allowed, I wanted us to have the kind of conversation we had. We may not have time today for the small group discussions, but I do want to introduce you to a few more things on the assessment. And Wendy and Deborah, if you see something in the text, let me know. So there are what we call attentional scales on here. Again, think about the quadrants, right? So awareness is one of the scales you saw on your assessment. And that really is a measure of our broad external, which is channel 1 scanning. Analytical conceptual, broad internal, channel 2, that's the conceptual planning. And then action narrow, the follow through focus, that's action focus. This is really kind of a combination of channels 3 and 4, but it has a bias toward 4, okay? And so when you see your results, and Jim, when you were talking about the results, you labeled it perfectly. The shaded areas are the norm for effective leaders, for leadership effectiveness. So if there's a target of where you want your score, your dark line to be, it is within there. But that doesn't mean if your awareness is higher than that population, that it's not good. It just means that it's slightly different, okay? And so someone with high awareness, as we can see for this person, is in the high mid-range at 72%. And low external distractibility, that's a really good combination. I'll speak to that in just a moment. So the awareness scales are mapping, if you will, the 4 quadrants. And then what there are distraction scales, and this is where our errors can come from. So if we have external errors due to irrelevant stimuli, that means when we're in channel 1, we're not really paying attention to the right kinds of cues. We're actually looking at stuff that doesn't matter for us. And folks that like to multitask, I find, tend to struggle with this. If we have internal errors due to our thoughts, the self-criticism, the daydreaming, that kind of stuff, that's what we call internal distractibility. And you can certainly see that in both channels 2 and 3. And then reduced flexibility. I think it was you, Cassandra, that said we have to be able to shift at the appropriate times between the 4 channels. And that's what reduced flexibility is, a distraction. It's a problem. We're staying stuck in one of the channels. So if you look at this profile, you can see that this person, that 72%, they're able to engage in channel 1 very well, see what's there, and they're not distracted by irrelevant things. It's a good combination. Now, their analytic, if you will, channel 2 with a leaning toward 3 also, is in a good range, and there's low internal distractibility also. So they're not going to be worrying, a lot of self-criticism, those kinds of things. And the action focused, that 3 and 4, this person is scoring in the higher end of that, which is great. That means that they are shifting well. So this profile actually is very positive for someone who's going to perform well in a variety of different circumstances, because they're in the mid-range of where, if you will, this norm population performs for reduced flexibility. Means that they can jump back and forth between channels, and they're not getting distracted, and they're staying focused on performance relevant tasks of their attentional field. So I hope that makes sense. Then you'll see also that there are the list of scales that you have. And I know you guys saw this already. So I'm just going to cover 3 of them here. Information processing in the work you do is absolutely essential. So a high score means that you're looking for challenges. Multitasking is something that you like to do. And lower scores, you prefer one task at a time. So I'm going to suggest here that under stress, folks that score high on this, you tend to really overload yourself, and you might even overload those others too. So it might be harder for you to stay calm under pressure. And the challenge though for low scores, because again, there's no one right answer, the self-awareness that's essentially, is you might just get too rigid in your view. Nope, can only do this. Yes, I know the building is burning down, but I can't go anywhere until we finish this task. And obviously we've got challenges with that. Control of others. So high desire is that we want to be in charge. We want to step up and take action. Awesome. If the building's on fire, I want people that are going to say, this is the way to the exit. Low might be able to say, as a delegative leader, and that's really a great style to have, they might say, well, you can choose whichever exit you'd like. I'm not so sure I'd like that when the building's on fire. So under stress, high may be over-controlled and unable to follow. Low scorers, unwilling to take the initiative and say, this is really the exit we should take. So this is, I wanted you to get a sense of how to read these. And obviously the speed of decision-making is necessary for us to be successful under pressure. So if I score high, it's really important for me to get it right. It may take longer, but it's really important for me to get it right. And low might be, that's okay. I want to get it done fast. And if there's some errors, somebody else will pick it up along the way. Under stress, high scores might be too afraid to make a mistake, too slow to commit. In the performance world of athletics, folks that score high on this, they tend to be maybe less willing to take the last second shot. Whereas the low folks, right, they end up being impatient and maybe rush other people. So I wanted you to kind of just be aware of that, and you all see where those scores come into play. And obviously there are many more scales. Are there any questions before I introduce something else to you? All right, I'm going to keep going then. You will have received an email from Bev, and I'd like each of you to go to that now, because in that email, you will have these 4 links that you can choose from, okay? And the first 3 have essentially, really, the first one's the only one that's been given to you. It's the only one that's been given to you. The second and the third are kind of summaries. The one I want you to pay attention to is the 4th one here. This is your sport report. Now, with permission, I'm going to try to pull up somebody's report, okay? And to do that, though, I'm going to need to stop sharing my screen real quick and gather up that report. So if you guys are comfortable with that, let me tell you, I'm going to try and show you what I mean by this, because it's a fantastic, fantastic assessment. All right, so Angela, if you would unmute yourself, may I have permission to reveal parts of your report?
Yes, you may.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. So let me go back to sharing my screen. Now, can you see the, can everybody see my screen now? All right, good. So you'll see that, Angela, you have the 4 options here. Choosing the bottom one gets you the athlete's mental edge. And what I like about this is, even though it says the athletes, and regardless of whether or not you're an athlete, what this report gives you is some more information really about how you perform under pressure. So your levels of awareness, what zone you get into, right? In those 4, the 4 areas. Metal is about confidence, competitiveness. I got a feeling that we might see Jen's competitiveness maybe higher than Angela's here, especially with how she performed during the, the activity. One of the things I would like about working with Angela, her killer instinct is on the lower side. And in the business world, that oftentimes is a positive because it means that you're fun to work with and easier to work with. So it gives you all this information. Now, what's really cool to me is if you navigate down to these AME navigation stations, okay? And what it does is it helps you to understand each of those components that are above further. But what I like is this, click here to go straight to your most likely errors. And what it does is it tells you, under pressure, what might you be most likely to do? So Angela, and again, we appreciate this. You are not alone. Overcommitting, I share that with you as my error analysis. And so you get to select a good description of what happens under pressure when you overcommit. It gives you information about how you can also change and to do some things differently. So I think that that's an awesome piece to this. Let me also show you another component here. So we are in battle stations. Oh no, here it is. The AME profile comparison section. This, as it says, you get to compare yourself to the greats. So here, click to access the AME comparison section. And now you get to select the sport that you want to compare yourself to. So world champions in general, pro tennis players, Olympic volleyball players, elite golfers, NBA players. Since the NBA is coming back, we'll give you a chance to compare Angela's scores to the NBA elite. And so you can see here that Angela does a lot more assessing, that awareness part, than the typical NBA basketball player, because their scores are in red and hers are in blue. And so those of you who are weekend warriors in another sport, I think you might find this to be pretty interesting. Any questions about how that works?
Well, according to mine, sir, it looks like I could take over as a head coach for the New England Patriots. Belichick's out.
You sure you want that job without Tom Brady?
Oh, I'm a New England fan. I'm from Rhode Island. We're going to miss him greatly, but he's going to do well. Now, just a joke. This was really good. Sir, thank you for sharing this.
It's my pleasure. And that's why I wanted to make sure you saw these TAIS options. I would encourage you, and I apologize for not preserving more time for you to have some discussions about your results with others, but I would encourage you to do this. Talk to other people about what you like best about your report and what you like least. And also, if there's anything that confuses you, as well as have some ideas with them about how you can work better under pressure. Especially if these are folks that you work with that you know, have that conversation. For yourself, I'd ask you to think about on your results. What does it confirm for you? What surprises you about it? What do you agree with or disagree with? What patterns are present that can contribute to your success? And what are some of the things that might be barriers to your success? And then finally, let me share this piece with you. To lead under pressure, there are a few things that you can do. Leaders that act under pressure and how the team will act under pressure. If you can understand that your team is going to mimic whatever you model. So you need to be mindful of how you behave during times of pressure. Please be aware of that. And again, don't panic. If you panic, the team will panic. If people see you at peace, they will remain at peace. So the need to monitor your emotions is essential. And
Joe,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're not seeing your slides. We're still seeing your screen.
Oh, you're kidding. Okay. How about, I got to stop sharing. Come back to that. Let me share. Thank you for letting me see that. How about now?
You're good. We're just seeing the innards.
Yep. And so these
Thank
are the
you.
3 things that I was going to suggest about how to lead most effectively under pressure. And number 3, I think, is the most important one here. Focus on the issue. Get back to the task. Don't worry about it. Don't avoid it. Don't run from the situation. What is the number 1 thing you can do to get that task done? When you're focused on that, you are doing what elite performers do, attending to performance relevant aspects of your attentional field. What can I get done right now? And if it's not the highest priority thing, let me get back to the highest priority thing. And I'll play the song for you in a moment. Those of you that remember Queen and the song Under Pressure. But before we do, we're going to send you a link in the chat box in just a moment for this reference from the Harvard Business School. But I want to start by thanking Deborah and Wendy. Absolutely. Without their support, I couldn't get this done. And even Matt was behind the scenes. Some of you might have seen that as well. And Wendy, I think you're going to send them a link to give us some feedback on how their experience of this program. Is that correct?
Yes, we'll be emailing a survey, and please, it'll be coming from my email. If you could please, it links right back into our system once you fill it out. So if you could please fill that out, it helps us to grow, and it helps us to know what we're doing good and should continue, and where we might be able to have some areas of growth to better serve you.
And they are an awesome support team. So when you think about your life being like this, scurrying around, maybe that means we're past the COVID times, and appreciate that if we keep things in perspective, the pressure won't be that bad. I'll encourage you to enjoy the song yourselves at another point in time, but thank you very much for participating and being a part of this for us. And Wendy, can you put that link into that, the article?
Yes, I'll go grab it off your show and drop it in there.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Glad it was awesome.
Thank you. Enjoyed the class.
Awesome. I'm glad, Angela. Thank you so much for letting me use your scores as an example.
No worries.
Yes, thank you all. This was great.
Awesome.
Thanks, Lakita.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you. We'll see y'all soon, I hope.
Hey, thank you guys. This was a great time spent. And I appreciate all what you guys have put into it. And Deborah, I'm going to wish you a good afternoon, boa tarde, and obrigado, and you have a great weekend, all right? Yeah.
Arigatou gozaimasu.
Ciao.
Awesome, Charles.
Ciao.
This was awesome, Wendy, Joe, Deborah. I enjoyed it. Thanks for working.
Thanks for joining us, Jim.
Thank you. We hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, hopefully so.
You are very welcome.
Yeah.
Looks like Roger has possibly some follow-up questions. I'm not sure if he's still on the line. Actually, Roger, I see you in the participant box. Did you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, ma'am. I was just, again, I'm one of the people who think a lot about stuff, but trying to relate this to some of the other things that we do provide in training. And I had a couple of questions as to how it might relate to different things. But anyway, if to not take up a lot of time now, would it be possible to perhaps have an email discussion? I know you all are busy and doing things, but just to, no pressure, no timeline on it, but just to be able to maybe forward a question or two to get some better understanding or insight into what the assessment's saying.
Certainly.
Wendy, I think you would be the best contact person for that, correct?
Yes, if you'd like to send me any information, and we could either do some general, if we find that it's some general information to come back. If you're looking at doing actually breaking down your own assessment, we do have coaching available that would put you with a professional that knows how to break all of these numbers down and help you set goals and work towards that. That's kind of our specialty.
All right, and then just I guess I don't know, educational kind of questions as to how does this link to the idea of flow, and I just have some just conversational type of questions, just out of curiosity more than anything. That's just the way I like to wrap my brain. This made me think a lot as you were talking about things. That's why the OODA loop is something that we in the military orient, observe, orient, decide, act, you know, and how it relates to the Toyota model and all those type of things. I heard a lot of parallels. It was echoing things that I've touched on before. So just out of curiosity, you know, am I making correct links, or maybe those type of things? Just that type of question as well. I'd also just channel them via Wendy to the appropriate channel. I guess let her decide who would be the best answer.
Yeah, I will tell you briefly now, though, that you're exactly right about flow. Flow is the ability to attend and deeply engage in the right channel at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is, again, you see it in athletics a lot, but I would say you can also see it in art. You see it in writing. I say you see it in the work environment as well. Time slips away because you are actually unconsciously shifting between the four channels at exactly the right times for each.
Yeah, and for me, I do a lot of drawing, artwork type of thing. I played, coached, and ref soccer. I love, and there's almost I don't know, not necessarily out of body, but there's almost a physical sense of when you are in that flow. It's just so it's almost difficult to describe, but there's very little really thinking going on because it's just happening. And the thinking kind of, you prep yourself for that moment kind of thing. It's the intersection of being that preparation and the execution of it, being in the right moment, so you're aware of the overall situational awareness of where you are in the field, plus the immediateness of, you know, am I marking my man or those type of things. Yeah, so a lot of this, my neurons were firing. I was trying not to, you know, be the guy who's, oh, listen to me, I got a question. Yeah, that kind of thing. That's why I waited, and if it's possible to maybe communicate a little bit on it, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. And Charles, you nailed it too. It's in music as well. You're exactly right. It's where it almost becomes unconscious, the way that we are jumping into the right place at the right time. I think about this in terms, again, this is the sports psychology piece, the immersion in the task. And that's why it does feel like things slow down, because you're so immersed in what you're doing that a lot of time actually passes, but it doesn't feel like very much time has passed.
Right.
Yeah. Me and Roger work together anyway. We're side-by-side partners, so I got to echo back exactly what he was talking about. I just had to start writing things on paper because I wanted to jump in and say so many things, because what you guys talked about, what you presented with the channels, it made a lot of sense. And there's a lot of theory that we teach when we're teaching leadership for, you know, for the ACC, the contracting folks here in Redstone. And a lot of what you talked about relates to the models and things that we use. So I've got a ton of questions. I can't wait. I want to kind of work with Roger, and Roger, please courtesy cop me on those questions, because I bet they're going to be the same, my friend. And right now we're teleworking, so it's good to see Roger. He's a good looking guy. He really is. He hates when I do that to him, but no, he's a delight to work with. And but yeah, I gotta echo what he said. I mean, the only way I wouldn't just turn my mic off was I just had to just write. So guys, thank you. Excellent. This really, as Roger said, just got the brain just going 90 miles an hour. So guys, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Joe, knowing that they are, they're basically, you know, really wanting to do a deeper dive and make some connection with the material that was presented today. Is there any specific program of ours that you could think of that would relate to this and be able to give them that opportunity?
Not specifically. Honestly, when you mentioned the coaching piece earlier, that's really what it is, almost creating something that is specific for you guys, though.
That's what I was thinking too. Like even if it was a small group coaching, like a
Yeah.
team coaching
Exactly.
opportunity that would allow your team to come together and work with one of our coaches
Right.
to help develop, that cross understanding between your curriculum and the school of thought.
Yeah. And this is so I introduced LDI. I introduced this assessment to LDI, and many people have become expert at it as well. I like it a lot because of obviously athletic piece of it. It's part of my assessment of players for draft, that type of thing. But it really is, how do you create the self-awareness so that the two of you get to that, again, the Yerkes-Dodson law, the peak of the sweet spot. That's really where you're in the zone. Performance is at its peak because my level of arousal is ideal and it's present in the now. So awesome. I'm really pleased that you guys have liked this so much. It was one of the ones I was a little worried about how to present this in Zoom, to do it virtually, but I'm thrilled that it's landed the way that it has, and truly the feedback that Wendy and Deborah gave me really helped make it a lot better for you guys than it would have been otherwise, I'll tell you.
We like making you look good, Joe. I sent the link out for the Leadership Under Pressure 3 strategies for keeping calm. You guys will find that in the chat box. I'll resend that also, Joe, with the when I send out the survey in just a bit.
Okay.
For those people who may have exited before it went into chat. So I'll go ahead and resend that. But Charles and Roger and anyone else on your team, if you want to get with me or if you want to get with Mary, I'm not sure if Mary's your coordinator, if there's something that we can work out, that we can set something up in order to support your team, taking a deeper dive into this pressure kind of thing, we'd be more than happy to team up with you and support in any way you can.
Leading under pressure too.
Yes, yeah.
Sounds good, guys. Thank you so much.
I like that. I like that.
I do too, Mary. I do too. And thank you for coordinating all this, Mary. You have been a fabulous partner in helping with the details. And I know we'll see you on Monday, but it's been great. And I think everyone's really enjoyed getting a taste of all of this.
Excellent. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to guess I know what you guys are going to be reading over the weekend.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, guys. Toodaloo.